Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. In this video I'm going to take the standard out of nowhere and then I'm going to try and analyze it shortly and talk about different triads that you can use over the different chords and find sort of a complete list of triads available. And from there I'm going to take some of these triads and I'm going to try to make some lines with them using the triads, their inversions, and also the open voice triads because they're sort of different sounds. So we get some more sort of traditional melodies, but also some melodies that are sounding a little bit more surprising, a little bit more angular. So since this video is a bit long and this format has three main parts, so a part that's analysis, a part that's finding the triad, and a part that's going to be about making lines with the triads, I made a list of contents in the description. So if you want to skip to some place in the video, then you can go check there and click on one of those times. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, so understanding the harmony, improvising with scales and arpeggios, or playing jazz chords, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. The first thing I want to do is to analyze the song and analyze the form and the harmony. Because if we understand how the song is put together, how the chord progression works, and how the different chords work, then we can choose scales and we can find the triads. And also understanding the form is going to tell us something about if there are places where we might want to have more sort of exotic scale choices or more interesting sounds. Because that's not always going to be the case, and it really depends on where in the song and what type of chord and how long. The way I'm going to play it today, and usually is played in the key of G major, so and that's also where it starts. The form of Out of Nowhere is basically 2 times 16, and the two parts, the two halves, are pretty identical, except in the first half you have a half ending, so you're going to the dominant, you're not going to the tonic. And in the second half you have a variation on that, and then you actually do return to the tonic to end the song. The start of it is just 2 bars of Gmaj7, and then usually it's played with 2 bars that are 2/5 in A flat, which is like B flat minor, E flat 7, which go back to Gmaj7. So the way I understand this is actually that it's an E flat 7. And it's what I call a double diminished chord. That's how I learned it. I think the other term that's used mostly is that it's an German augmented 6th chord, I think. So the idea here is just that we have something that's kind of coming out of a sharp 4. So the sound of the E flat 7 in this case is closely related to the C sharp diminished. So if you take the C sharp diminished and then you double diminish, which already sounds nice, hip and theoretical, the third, then you get an E flat instead of an E. And actually if you check out this voicing, then that's the same voicing an octave higher. That's an E flat 7. So that's kind of how we're going to hear that. When you play this type of chord, you're going to hear an E flat 7. But then in this case, it's going to resolve back to the 1 chord, like this. There are a lot of different explanations for this and how that works. I've learned the sharp 4 double diminished thing, so that's kind of what I'm relying on. And I know that most people probably think of them as, and I think it's a German. You can correct me if I'm wrong, because there are a few augmented 6 chords, but all the augmented 6 chords are of course also coming out of the sharp 4. So in that way, it's pretty much different names for the same kind of thing. So that goes back to the 1 chord. Then we get. And here there are a few versions of what happens here. One way of playing it is that it plays 2 bars of tonic, and the other one is to do 1 bar of tonic and then 1 bar of the dominant on the 4th degree, which is in this case then a tritone dominant for the 3rd degree. So we get a B minor, and then you get B minor, E7. And here I'm going to be playing B minor and then E7 altered, I think. I think the melody kind of suggests that the F sharp is sustained, but the way I'm playing it, and the way I know the melody at least, and the way I'm playing it is going to be B minor, E7 altered to the 2nd degree, and then you get a minor cadence back to the 2nd degree, so and then 2 bars of A minor. And then for the first half, you get 2 bars of E flat 7. I think for this song, that you can also kind of tell, this song Out of Nowhere is really about that E flat 7. and then how that works in different ways in a song in G major. So it's kind of, that's also why it comes, because here in the place where you get the E flat 7 the second time is where you would normally expect there sort of an A7, so the dominant, and here you get an A7, but it's the tritone substitute of the A7, and then you get basically just a 2/5 back or a D sus to D7, and then to the second half. Yeah, so to me this piece is a little bit about how does E flat 7 work in G major in different ways, and it's the sound of that one in this key somehow. Of course we can't really ask the composer, but that was always how that came across to me. Then we get the second half, so that's actually the same thing. So we get 2 bars of G major, then we get the double diminished thing that's then turned into a 2/5, obviously, and then G major, C7, E minor, the dominant, the auxiliary dominant to go to A minor, A minor, cadence, A minor, and now so A minor is of course the 4th degree, well it's the 4th, it's the 2nd degree, it's a subdominant chord in G major, and then that moves up to a minor subdominant for the second half in the I don't remember what bar number it is, but I hopefully have edited in the progression so you can see it. And then we get a turnaround, which is in this case the 3rd degree, flat 3 diminished, which is again a sharp 4 diminished in inversion, and then a 2/5 back to 1, and then some sort of turnaround. So that's sort of the basic construction of the song. I think what you can see here is that we have, if you play the song medium, you have these periods if you play where you play the tonic for 2 bars, and if you're not playing it too fast, you can kind of use this as sort of a modal place, and you can be a little bit free with what scale choices you make there. And actually the same goes for the A minor in the second 8 bars of each half. And that is something that I'm going to be discussing a little bit in terms of triad choices also, because if we look at different scale choices, then sometimes it can be interesting just to have other sounds there. But I'll get to that once we start looking at the triads also. Hopefully this video is going to help you understand, if you don't already, why it is so important to learn your diatonic triads, and also the quite vast amount of material and the vast amount of melodies that you can make if you are able to play your diatonic triads in inversions and in different patterns, and also the open voice triads, and how you can use that if you can tie that material and look at each of those, so each inversion and each triad as a different melody that you can improvise with and that you have in your vocabulary to a chord. Because if you're connecting all this to a chord, then you actually have a really, really solid amount of material available, and that's something you want to work on and that you can get something out of. And the thing with the triad is it's only 3 notes, and it's a very sort of strong melodic structure that we're really used to hearing as a melody, and that makes it a very, very nice tool to have in your sort of basic improvising toolkit when you're trying to come up with some solos for a song. Now that we know the key and the chords of the song, and we understand the harmony a bit from the analysis, then we can start looking at what kind of triads can we use on each of the chords. Simply if we start from the beginning, because we have these 2 bars of G major in the beginning, so there's a lot of time where we can try some different sounds. You can even start combining them. I have some videos on triad pairs if you're not familiar with that type of improvisation. But really you can also just take different triads out. So if we look at the G major chord, of course we're in the key of G major, so it's just a G major scale. While the sort of basic arpeggios, triad arpeggios that you can sort of tap into would of course just be the G major triad, the B minor triad, because that would just be something that's anyway part of the Gmaj7 chord. The D major triad is nice as well, because that's going to give us sort of the top part of it. So we have the 5th, the 7th, and the 9. And then of course also if you take the one that's a third under the G, so the E minor triad, because that gives us a 6, which sounds nice as a 13 also. and it's going to give you the root and the third. So already just from those basic, from the basic major scale, we already have 4 different triads that we can use. And you can of course improvise by just using the triads, but you can also work on making lines with them. But we can actually look a bit further because we have 2 bars of G major. That's actually time to maybe explore a little bit more sort of a modal approach to it and just look at, well, G major, what kind of sounds can we have here? And so the Lydian sound, so the Gmaj7 C7 might be useful as well. And in there we get a few more things available, because the reason why I left out, how many did I leave out? I left out 3 triads in G major. I left out the A minor, the C major, and the F sharp diminished triads. And basically the reason is just that I didn't want to have a C in there. They're less strong. If you have to take 3 notes and use them, then having 1 note that you can't really use is not so useful. So and since we anyway can use 4 triads, then I left out these 3. But if we take the Lydian sound, then the C is going to become a C sharp, and that means that those are actually not such a big problem. The first one would be the C sharp diminished triad, which is, it's a diminished triad, so it's a little bit unstable in sound, so it's not the first one I would use. The next one would be the A minor would become A major, so this type of sound, which is quite usable, I think. Even if you play the melody and you want to emphasize this, so that's the normal melody, but if you turn that into the Lydian sound, then that works really well, especially like this, because it's really this strong triad sound that's not really in the key. You can maybe even start experimenting with stuff like that. But yeah, it mainly just use the A major triad here on top of the melody is a nice sort of effect. Okay, so we have the A major triad and we have the F sharp minor triad, because now the diminished F sharp diminished is going to be F sharp minor, and that works well as well. So like this, we already have 4 triads that we can use from major. There are an additional 2 or 3 from Lydian, and if we take it a little bit further, there are a few more options, of course, that you can look into. One would be to use the Lydian Augmented scale, so you're really thinking, and that doesn't fit with the melody, obviously, because the melody has a D, and now you're going to a scale. So G Lydian Augmented is the same as E melodic minor, so, and you get this type of sound. If you play a few choruses, then and you have these 2 bars of G major several times in each chorus, then that could be something you can try out and work with and use that sound. This nice B major triad that you can mess around with a bit, because in that sound, I'm sort of assuming that you guys know how to figure out the diatonic chords and all the scales that I'm talking about, and if not, then you kind of just have to ask in the comments, because, or I'll get back to you, or somebody else, because I know a lot of the people who are watching this will actually know those, and you can also see this is the reason why you want to know them. This is what you can do with it. If you have that knowledge, take it quite far. So you get the B major triad, you get G augmented triad. I think those are sort of the main ones that I would use. And then of course another way of playing the Lydian Augmented sound, not the Lydian Augmented, but the Augmented major 7 sound, is to play the augmented scale, which is also something that seems to be coming up all the time in these videos. That would just be using essentially the B, the G and the E flat major triad, and then combining those. That's a few options in there. I'm gonna try to see if I can edit in some sort of list on top of this. I'm probably gonna create like an editing hell for myself with this, but that's hopefully there right now, in fact, and then you can use that as a sort of reference. So the E flat so E flat 7, B flat minor, 2/5, or just E flat 7 for 2 bars. If we play it as a 2/5, then I don't think we need to go into as many weird scale choices as we do with the Gmaj7, and there's a reason for that, and the main reason is probably that this is already a surprising sound in the key. So we're in G major, and this is the sort of a weird sound already. So that's how that works. And then you can just play the sound, and then that will keep it interesting enough, because we're in this context. So for the B flat minor, I would just go with really just the basic arpeggios, and that would be the same as what you would do with the G major. So I would take the one from the root and the one from the third, so that's a D flat major, and also the one from the fifth, which is an F minor. On the E flat 7, so the E flat 7 to me, the way I would play that in terms of just scale choices, I would play that as a Lydian dominant. I mean, it just follows sort of the basic rule that if you have a dominant that doesn't resolve, so it doesn't work as a dominant, it resolves in a different way than you use Lydian dominant, and that works quite well for this one as well. If we look at what we have available there, usual suspects, so E flat and G half diminished, B flat minor, and then of course, since it's a Lydian dominant, the F major triad is D flat augmented triad. Yeah, and actually you can do the same. Since it's a major chord, you can also, with some success, go down a diatonic third, and then you get a C, so the C minor triad works as well. If you really want to pull out sort of the Lydian sound, or if you just want to, I mean, just really playing E flat 7 is already going to work just fine for this, especially since you have to find a way to resolve it back to G, which is of course not where it normally would go. Then we get G major, and then sometimes I'll play the C7 here. So C7 in this case is a tritone dominant, and that means that it's a Lydian dominant. We actually get the same set of arpeggios as we just did for the E flat 7, so that means that's going to be C, E diminished, G minor, and then when we start adding the arpeggios, the triads out of the Lydian sound, then you would have a B flat augmented and a D major triad. Then we get the 3 chord. So obviously here we have the B minor triad works well. We have the triad from the third. It's not the kind of place where we would put a 9 on that one, because that's not, basically we don't have as many triads available for this one. Then we get the E7 altered. So really E7 altered in terms of triad choices, even though here we can't, with all the chords we can't really start stacking thirds, that doesn't make any sense, and that's difficult. But really it's just the same as the B flat 7, which would be the tritone substitute. And then we have the Lydian dominant sound of that one. So if I think of it from that, then just to find the triads, that would be one way of doing it. So that would be B flat, D diminished, F minor, A flat augmented, C major. Those would be the triads you can use. In the context again, what you're gonna be missing here. So for me, it's like if I play this chord, I think the one note that I really want to have in there is the third. Also because it's the point of the chord is that third that resolves up to the A. So I mean I would use a C major triad and also a B flat major triad maybe, but then I would still need to, when I make a line, to somehow have the G sharp in there, or if you're thinking of it from B flat like this and an A flat. So that's an important thing to sort of keep in mind when you're working with this. Then the A minor, so since there's a cadence to the A minor, I often play it as a tonic minor chord, and actually the melody doesn't really suggest that. I think the melody kind of suggests an Aeolian sound almost, but when you solo on it, maybe that's just because I've learned so much like Bob material, so I would mostly be using sort of a melodic minor sound on it. That or a Dorian sound, really. I think those are the most natural sounds in there. Melodic minor, we get A minor, C augmented, E major, the G sharp augmented, I don't think it's that good. B minor, also not so. So, and the reason why I'm becoming a little bit more picky with what triads work, out of the melodic minor scale now is that here again, as I did have with the dominant, you have to be a little bit more careful with really getting the sound out. This is an A minor bar chord that we have for 1 bar, so you kind of do need to maybe reference the sound of that one, and you can't just jump around up in the upper extensions and not really connect with it, because then you can't hear it's there. I think it has to do with that. That can be something to be aware of also when you're soloing. And that's why I also talk about, like, you want to be able to really spell out the chord. Sometimes you kind of have to, and sometimes you can leave it much more open. And of course, if you play several choruses, you don't always have to be very clear on that one, on that A minor chord. But it is sort of the beginning of a piece in the form, and it is a transition. So I would suggest that most of the time you pick triads that will be and notes and actually make lines that are kind of clear for that thing. And if you don't do that, it has to be really on purpose, and it kind of has to maybe melodically make sense, or there has to be some other reason why you don't do it. So yeah, so that's going to be A, C augmented, maybe the E, and not much more. You can use, oh yeah, and then of course, because it's tonic, you can use the one that's under it, so you can also use the F sharp. Let's see, so I think the next 2/5, let's just keep that kind of simple, and also just to keep the video under 10 hours. There I would just use the altered sound again for the E7, so this whole 2/5, just use the altered, and those triads that I already went over. Then we get E flat 7, so at this part of the song, and that is very clearly E flat 7 Lydian dominant, and that means that they're the same arpeggios or the same triads as what we have the first time. Which is pretty much all the triads except the A half diminished. Let's see, so then we get the cadence back to the second half. So here we have an A minor that's clearly, if it's an A minor chord, then it's clearly not tonic, so it's not going to be melodic minor. The thing that fits there is Dorian, really. The chord has a function, a very clear function. It's suspending the D7, and that also means that you kind of have to play it clearly as a starting point, I think. In this case, since it's a 2 chord in a 2/5, we don't want to have the F sharp in there, really, unless we start messing around with the D7 and make that into an altered chord. Then you can use the 13 as well. But that's a little bit another discussion, I think. So we could just get the normal straight ahead arpeggios that we can use, would be like A minor, C major, E minor. Then the D7, if we just take the alto dominant first, because that's kind of quick to do. So then we have the same idea as with the with the E7. We can think of it as being A flat 7, so the tritone dominant, as a Lydian dominant, that's the same scale. So A flat, C diminished, E flat minor, and then of course also F sharp augmented, or G flat augmented, and a B flat major scale triad. And then we also have the option of playing it as a dominant out of the diminished scale. Sort of the main thing that I would work with there is just going to be the major triads that are in that scale, and that's D major triad, F major triad, and then A flat major triad, and a B major triad. And of course, all of these triads, you have a minor version as well, so you actually do have like D minor, F minor, let's see, A flat minor, and B minor. And they are there as well, you can also use those. And then you have some diminished triads, but as soon as you start doing that, then it's a little bit like, then you might as well just play diminished arpeggios. So I tend to work more just with those major triads, occasionally the minor triads as well. And that's sort of where I take all of that from. That was the different triads that we have available in the first half. There are two more chords actually in the second half. I'm just going to leave that out right now because otherwise this video is just going to get way too long. And this is certainly a topic I can return to in other videos. Just to keep it sort of a little bit short, and then we can start talking about lines, because I mean, one thing is figuring all this out. You can tell that what I'm doing here is quite simple. There's no, as always, there's no magic involved in jazz guitar. Now let's just start looking at how can you make lines with all these triads, because if you can't actually use them, then they're not, I mean, they're not difficult to find, but it's not worth anything if you can't make any sort of nice melodies with it, or if you don't have any idea about how to improvise with them. Because there are definitely different approaches to this. And you can also tell with the triads that you can actually go from being really straightforward with using melodies and getting melodies that sound very very normal, very much like the melody of the song, for instance. I mean, if you look at the main theme of, then essentially the theme is based around a D major triad with an extra scale note in between. So it's so that's already using triads in that sense, and you will find that that's very often the case for standards and for melodies in general, and of course solos. I'm going to split it up so that I'm going to take different approaches. Where the first one I think I want to talk about is a little bit about just using the main triad, mixing it a bit up with the scale, and also using the inversions, which is something that's often left out, I think. If we take our G major chord, and just to focus on what would be a really straightforward sound to that. So of course you need to be able to play some G major lines with the G major triad. What you have with that is of course the G major triad in itself. It very quickly becomes a little bit too close to home and too close to the root, and that can actually make it difficult to use. Again, if we listen to the melody is really emphasizing the 9, and it's very much in the extensions. Actually, Out of Nowhere is in the extensions really a lot as a melody, maybe even more than I would consider average for a standard, especially given how old it is. So what I'm doing here is I'm just sort of using the triad, the G major triad, as a reference point, and then I'm still using other notes as well, which is of course, in the end you want to do that with any kind of structure if you want to really integrate it into your sort of melodic vocabulary. So that will work, of course. You can make certain types of melodies with it, because we're sort of focusing on the G major triad, which is the lowest part of the chord. It has a certain sound, and we're not in the sort of up in the extensions, and you can still kind of, I think you can still kind of hear that in what I just improvised. So if we take the next one, which would be the B minor triad. Then we have more material. It's immediately just going to be more connecting with our G major 7 sound, because now if the bass is playing the G, we kind of have the whole sound there. We have the 3rd and the 7th. So now again, just trying to lean on the B major triad, and you kind of have to see it and the inversions. And here you can really tell, like, you can really use the fact that this B minor triad has a few inversions that are nice to use. So that's one way of going about it, and again we're working with just the static sound of the G major. I'm not too much thinking about like where we go. This is though one of the places where if you're using a B minor triad here, then when you go to the E flat or the B flat minor, you can actually use that as a motif right here and move it down a half step, and that can be also be useful to keep in mind. So when you're looking at the triads, sometimes you can sort of voice lead them to the next chord in an interesting way, create continuity in your lines on a larger level, which is also something that's important to have, that we don't just play this on this chord and then something completely else on the next chord. and that type of thinking and being aware of it at least will help with that when you're trying to practice a song. So let's see if we do. So in that way you can just keep on going and use this to move from the G to the B flat minor. And of course that's going to happen in several places probably. But now I'm moving just really everything parallel in like just sliding really, and that can happen. But probably often it's going to sound nicer if you can do that in a way that's not so parallel. And that you just can use the idea to play lines, so that you don't play lines that are like, which that might work, but it can also be nice to just have. So the B flat minor, E flat 7 sounds, let's just sort of split that in two. So let's just take it where we just played as a straight ahead 2/5 and using just A flat, or maybe for the other sound we can talk about how it is to use sort of Lydian dominant sound on it. And so for the first one, I mean, that would be sort of the type of sound that you would get there. And this is really just playing, I'm more or less just playing B flat minor triad material for the entire 2 bars. And then right now it's going to from E flat minor to really just E flat major triad. For this song that kind of works, but of course again that has to do with the fact that just the basic sound of the chord is already surprising at that point, and it's actually important to bring out. So you can get quite far with just using that. Let's see, what else can we do? You could take sort of the triads from the third of the B flat minor, so, and then connect that to the triad from the third of the E flat, which is of course a G flat diminished triad. So now we have, and then that would become, or so this movement. And then if you make a line with that, that could be and in that way move from one to the other. So those kind of ideas. Again, just you're kind of using the triad within the scale, and you see the triad within the scale and making lines with it. Using primarily the triad notes, but not only. So in that way, if you start thinking about this triad and say, well, that's there, but you also realize that you then also have this, or, and if you do that in inversions, you would have, so the B flat minor second inversion here, but you also have this one. Maybe you can think of it like this also, that the A flat is in with as well, and in that way you have some extra notes that you can sort of put in between. Then we can move on to the G major C7 to B minor, and here, so if you don't play this, I mean if you play this as 2 bars of G major, then you could really just treat it like that and then start using different triad versions and use the Lydian Augmented sound and all that stuff. But I think since we're kind of coming out of the, I would consider the E flat 7 a surprising sound, outside sound in the context here. So if you're really using that and you want to go back home, then you're not going to sort of start using 2 strange sounds on top of that right away. And that means that you can maybe start thinking of the G major 7 and the C7 as something that's connected. And one way you can think about this is also because the G major 7, so G major and the scale that you use for the C7 is, which is G melodic minor, are actually connected in the sense that they're the same scale except for one note. The B becomes a B flat. And that's again something you can use in your line. So you can also use that just thinking from whatever you're playing on the G major, you can just change the B into a B flat for the next chord, and then you have something you can use on the C7. And especially if you don't play exactly the same thing, so if you're just using sort of the same structure as a starting point for your melodic idea, then you can get some really good lines out of that. So that could be something like, and that can be something that you can generate a lot of ideas with. Of course, you do then need to use, if you're using triads, you need to think in triads that has a B in there. But yeah, that's how that works. So and really what I'm doing is just that I'm using the B minor triad on the G major. That's really for me the go-to triad for that sound, obviously, because that is the top part of the Gmaj7 chord, so it's kind of close to home, but it's not, we're out of the G, so we still sound a little bit, we sort of sit the right place in the harmony, for my taste anyway. So you can use that, and then really what happens is just if you kind of voice lead your melodic idea, you're kind of almost playing this type of progression, really. So you can use that as an idea as well. And of course we do the same thinking, really like a G major. You can get those types of ideas as well, so that becomes G major, G minor, and then on the next one, like maybe a D major, I think I used a D major, and then some sort of E7 altered line back to A minor. So that will be sort of the way to handle that. So the B minor is, of course, as I mentioned in the analysis, is not so interesting, because you want to keep that a little bit clear, so you're just going to be using B minor and D major for the biggest part, I think. Then we get the E7 altered, which you can do really a lot of things with. And also, this is again this thing that, and I made a whole series of videos actually on triad pairs, because melodic minor is something that works really well for triad pairs. If you make lines using these triad pairs and play first something from one triad, then something from another one, then you kind of have this shifting set of colors in your melody, which I think is a nice effect, and which I think is also a huge part of the sort of effect of using triads in your improvisation, that you pick out 3 notes and then you're really emphasizing them because they're in the triad. Even if you're using other notes, you're still giving them the emphasis and making them the target notes, and that's gonna pull out certain colors on top of the chord, and that gives you, if you have different triads available, it gives you different things you can pull out on top of the chord in terms of sounds, and that's not only like a melodic, but also just the aspect of what colors you want to get across in your solo. I think that's a useful thing to check out. If we look at the triad pairs, we can sort of come up with, so I probably mentioned that in another video, like my favorite one is usually using the augmented triad and then the major triad just above it. So in this case, that's actually, since E7 altered is F melodic minor, the augmented triad is an A flat augmented triad, and then a B major triad, and then you can use those and come up with some lines on so. And I think that's a nice one, also because the augmented sound is really present, and that's a nice sound to pull out, and then it's really not there when you play the B flat, and then all of it is on top of this chord. And that's a certain type of sound. You can hear now we're moving a little bit away from just playing sort of the straight ahead melodies, like which is again also using triads, but it's a very different way than you get from this type of sound, I think. And that's also a nice one to do. So that one is one of my favorites, the A flat augmented B flat. You can use F minor and G minor together as well, which I think sounds really good for this sound as well. Also, just because you have, like, the F minor is the top part of a lot of E7 altered voicings, and that means that that's a nice triad to use. You can of course just explore that. The one that's everybody's always using would be the two major triads, so that would be like B flat and C. It's not so clear because you're missing the A flat. I don't know, for me it's a little bit like you have to leave out one note. Why on earth would you leave out the A flat? But at the same time, it can be a huge effect to just use that because it's unclear, where you kind of expect an also dominant to sort of be really sort of this rich dominant sound, and then once you start playing it like this, you get the alterations, but you don't really get, you miss this one in the melodies, and that can be an interesting effect. The next chord would be the A minor chord. So if we're focusing on the A minor melodic sound on this one as well, just because it's a nice tonic minor sound, I think, and it's also the most common one for. Of course, like the straight ahead ones would be really work well, and then you can kind of choose. Do you want to really bring out, of the two extensions that you really want to bring out, do you want to bring out the minor major sound, so the G sharp? Then you would probably use like the C augmented triad, or do you want to work more with the 6, this type of sound, and then you would use the F sharp diminished triad. And of course you can also just mix them up. Don't underestimate just using the A minor triad. Again, this is relating this to the scale exercises videos and some of the other stuff I talked about, where if you can play the... So really when you're practicing these different patterns through your scales on an A minor chord, and it's still, because I have the different patterns available, I have much more available in terms of how interesting melodies I can make, because I don't have to play. So I can also do before I start really getting into other notes. And that really has to do with, I find, just really checking out how to do all the differences, so that all those scale exercises. So now we move to the E flat 7, which I've kind of covered already because we have that in the beginning of the song as well, and then the D7. And for the D7, let's just talk about that. So the altered sound is really sort of the thing that I would focus on here. I think that will work well on this place in the form to have a really altered dominant to go back to G. Well, we get the same amount of triads, of course, and you can do the same things with triad pairs as I did on the E7. So that means F sharp and A flat. So F sharp augmented and A flat, or the A flat and B flat triads, or we can do E flat minor, F minor. They're all like good triad pairs to use for this type of sound. And of course you can also just experiment with other sounds. So if you're using A flat major triad a lot on, so basically you're gonna play, you can really get this sound out of it if you're sort of staying away from the F sharp when you're playing on it. Which doesn't really sound like that one, but because it doesn't, that actually might be a good effect. So that can be something to sort of really focus on, and that's actually leaving out notes and focusing just on the triad. So this is coming out of the triad pair, so F minor, E flat, and then F minor, E flat, resolving. So that would be one way of working on that, and then of course the other one that I talked about would be the diminished sound. So to me, the diminished sound is of course mostly like a D7 with a flat 9 and a 13. So that's why I'm playing in, like here also, B major triad on top of it. So that would be something. And for the rest, it's some, I mean, the diminished scale is really just about chaining together triads when I play it anyway. So that could be one thing to do. So let's move on to using some of the more vaguer sounding scale ideas and some of the more open sounding structures like the open voice triads, and make lines for those, because that is definitely a different sound. So until now I've kept it within the triad pairs. It starts to get a little bit more vague. What's going on is a little bit less clear, and you get a certain type of sound out of that. But of course we didn't really touch on all the open voice triads, and you can of course do a lot with that as well. Some of the other like scale choices. So I think I'm just going to cover this on a few chords, just to give you an idea about how I work on it. Also, just because working this through the entire song is going to be way too long, and then I can return, as I mentioned before, I can return to this topic later. Of course, if you guys have an idea about like try and do it on that song or try and do it on this, then suggestions are of course welcome. It's always nice to hear what songs I don't know what songs you know, obviously, so that's always interesting to hear that as well, and useful, because it means that the videos are more useful for you. So let's just focus on the G major chord for now. So if I had to work on the open voice triads, the one I'm using now is of course like a B minor open voice triad, and the thing with using this structure, it can be a little bit difficult because it's two large intervals next to each other, and that is a certain sound that we're not as used to hearing, which is also why we like it probably, and you want to treat that in a certain way. I think that the general idea for starting how to work with this is that you want to work with it as an arpeggio, really, that's first just giving you a certain sound of the chord, and then you kind of need to melodically maybe resolve it a bit. And I think, yeah, I mean that's kind of how I work with that sound in general. When you have these open, larger structures, it can be a little bit difficult to take them up too far. I think if I'm using open voice triads on a major 7 chord, I will use the G, I will use the B minor and the D major. Maybe I might use the E minor. The thing that you get really quickly is that one of the notes is going to be so low, and in the context it wants to sound like the root, and you maybe get a sound that you don't really want to have, so that can be hard to get to sound really good, and that's usually what's happening with it. But those three are still fairly easy to get to sound. So D major triad on top of the G major is really useful. And of course, the G is nice too. You can tell that, I mean, you need to know like the different ways of playing that triad, and then have them pretty well in your playing to use this. They're a little bit difficult to play, but But then again, the type of sound you get from it is very worthwhile. And of course you can mix this up and then say, well, I want to use, if you do want to use some of the triads that are more out there, so let's say that I want to use, now let's use the B minor, and then to get a Lydian sound, maybe an A major. Then that can work quite well. Let's see. So there's a D major and then an A major, or maybe E minor and F sharp minor. And then I'm using, so the upper part, because I'm using this to sort of state the main chord, so of course that's the E minor, and then I'm using the F sharp not as an open voice triad on top of it, just to get a melody that sort of sounds in balance. And I guess it's a taste thing as well. I mean, there can be times where you want to have just lots of these sort of intervallic structures in your solos. But in this case, I think it's nice to just think of them as part of a more natural sounding melody. And in that case, it's probably useful. Also, if you, I guess, for me, the places where I know this mostly are like classical pieces, like some of the Bach and some of the Chords stuff has this in there. And then that's kind of how I want to use them melodically as well, even though I'm using them with all these upper structures and different colors. The melodies that I tend to want to make are a little bit like that. And the same would be the case if I'm using these types of structures on the B flat minor E7. So that would be just trying to sort of throw them in there, and then because there are sort of these large intervals, then melodically I resolve them a bit. And sometimes that does mean that I will resolve them. You could, for instance, resolve. So first you get this open voiced B flat minor triad that will work well here. It will work on both chords actually. And then we really take the F major triad afterwards to get the sort of Lydian Augmented sound on that one. So the thing you need to be aware of is that you probably want to take, when you use the open voice triads, I find that it works better if you take something that's a little bit closer related. So that also means that I will probably for the E7 use something that has the third in there. I think. Yeah. Different versions of that. And so that means for an E7, the F minor and the D half diminished, maybe the A flat major triad, A flat augmented. So those types of sounds, and really you can tell like the rest of the line is really simple. But you can of course also say, well, I want to go on to using another triad and then resolve that. That's really what's happening here. That has to do with sort of how you want to build the tension in your melodic lines. Something that's maybe a little bit difficult to really talk about. It is still so that if you play like scale type lines, then they're kind of clean and resolved and you don't have to worry too much about it. That gets a little bit boring, so you want to add intervals, and then the larger the intervals and the more large intervals you add, the more you have to take care that it makes sense what you're doing, that it still sounds like a melody. But at the same time, you can practice hearing melodies. I think mostly if you can hear melodies like that yourself, then you can also get them to sound good in your lines. But you have to experiment a bit with how that sounds. When can you hear the melody? When can't you hear a melody like that? And sometimes you'll make something and you think, well, that sounds that you have to play it several times to really judge for yourself if it works as a melody. I think you need to develop that. It's a good thing to also be conscious about in terms of what you play. In general, you just want to always judge what you play from. Does it sound good? Does it make sense as a melody? Is it what I would consider nice melodically? And also, when you're listening to other people, of course, to listen to what they do and understand if they're creating what you would call more like a melodic tension than a harmonic tension, because that's a different thing. That's also what is sometimes described as angular, I guess. And that's definitely the case here with these E altered lines. That sometimes you will have different types of... And for me it's really sort of connected to how you use intervals and how you skip around and how predictable that is in the melody. And if it gets too chaotic, you kind of lose track. So for me it's always been about trying to find examples where I thought, well, that sounds surprising, but it doesn't sound like chaos, and it doesn't sound like it doesn't make sense. And those are the things that I would try and figure out or try to imitate. I think one guy that actually is really, really good at this is Mark Turner. He can do the strangest things melodically and still get it to make complete sense. And that can be worthwhile checking out, I think. And Kurt Rosenwinkel took that from him more than anybody else, but I don't know for sure. But I get the impression that actually happened like that. So that's something to be aware of with the open voice triads and how you make melodies with them. Keep it, I would say, to make it easy in the beginning, keep them a little bit closer to that. Don't go completely up in the upper structure triads immediately with them, but keep them a little bit closely related to the chords, and then really try and mix them so that you have sort of the open voice triad as a statement somewhere in your line, and it's something you're gonna, maybe you don't need to build into it so much. You can also just take a break and then make it into something. And then, because it's like moving from here till here, it's a line with a relatively small amount of notes that is moving 2 octaves. That's a statement, if you can get it to make sense. But it's also very easily something that doesn't make any sense. So that's... And now I forgot what I played, but okay. You want to think about that when you're trying to come up with the melodies. That's how that works. And then in the beginning, probably just try and see if you can sort of resolve it. And so another thing that I want to talk a little bit about is also this idea of really emphasizing certain sounds. I think that the G major chord is probably the easiest one to talk about with this, because we kind of have like this almost modal vibe to the piece in the beginning, with the 2 bars of G major. I already showed you a different set of triads you can get from the Lydian Augmented and also from the Lydian sound. So really sort of on purpose leaving out part of the main sound of the chord. So that in this case I'm playing an A major triad, like I did for the melody. And if you emphasize that, then you don't have the original part of the chord, so the B minor triad in there. And that is a nice effect to have on top of the G major sound, I think. So where you come out of, if you say you come out of like a D7 altered line, and you expect it to just resolve, but you're instead going somewhere else with it. And that works. So in the context of that, so if you really make an altered line that's really pulling towards the one chord, and then you're just going to emphasize sort of this upper structure Lydian sound, that's a very nice trick to have in there. And of course you can do the same with sort of a Lydian augmented sound. So in this case it will make more sense to maybe resolve it into the B major triad to just get... And that's actually a sound that's then going to be sort of effectful, because it's still, 2 of them are still home, but then the sharp 5 is really out there. Let's see how well that works. So this type of sound. And then you, of course you can hear, like, because I kind of worked a lot with triads and with inversions, then when you sort of do these kind of things, the way that line is just built is it's partly just a triad pair, and then it becomes something else. And it is using the triad pairs that I practice, but also using just other triads in the sound there. So basically just really trying to chain together different triads from the E minor melodic scale. Let's see, so if we do that, so that's one way of doing that. The other one will be to use the augmented scale So and let's see if we can play a dominant sound leading into that. So D7 altered. That would be this type of sound. Just to use sort of the cliche microbricolic. And if you have to get a sound like that to make sense, you kind of need to stay on it a bit, because otherwise you can't really get all the notes out there. It is so complex sounding that you kind of need to hit quite a few different notes to really get it across that it's not just E melodic minor, that it is in fact the augmented sound. And that's also probably why we tend to very quickly just go into like a cascading triad idea, because that's an easy way to sort of paint that sound over the chord. So this video, I had the idea to make a video about using the triads and just demonstrating how I make melodies with it a bit for some time now, and I came across this great, I'm gonna link to that video also in the description, a video of Jonathan Kreisberg playing Out of Nowhere. That was kind of how I ended up using Out of Nowhere, because I thought it actually has some of the things that are useful with having this sort of almost modal vibe to it that I talked about. That's an important part of why I took this song. And anyway, it's just Jonathan Kreisberg playing a great solo on the song. And he actually uses a few of these techniques also, and now I might be messing it up with a recording of his on Out of Nowhere as well. But he does use, like, the augmented scale comes along, and there are stuff happening like that. And in general, I'm planning to do like a video where I'm talking about some of the like nice jazz guitar videos that I found on YouTube. So not the lessons, but just the performances. And then talk a little bit about what I think is nice about each one of them, because I think you can also, again, another way of learning something from the examples that are there, and also the things that are kind of hard to talk about in terms of just putting them in a normal lesson, which, like this one, is a bit vague. But at the same time, it's very important information, and it's nice to just go searching for a way of covering that in a YouTube video. So that's what I'm going to do. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, if you want to check out scales, arpeggios, chord voicings, stuff like that, then subscribe to my channel. I publish a new lesson every Thursday. I've been doing it for quite some time already, so there's really a lot of material available. And also there's a nice community around the channel, so if you ask something, then hopefully I'll get to your comments, but also very often other people will chip in with what they know, and there are a lot of people who can actually play quite well that are also checking out these videos and really have something to add to the discussion, so that's very nice. If you want to help me keep making all these videos, then check out my Patreon page. There's a small community of people that are so generous that they help me and support my videos, and that helps me keep making all these videos and find the time and the money to do so. So check that out. That's been a huge help for me the last 6 months or so that I've been working with them, and I'm very grateful for all the support that they're giving me. And that's also one of the reasons why I can actually make these longer videos, because they take kind of long to edit and stuff like that. But it's worthwhile, and Patreon is really helping me doing that. So check out my Patreon page if you want to support my videos. And for the rest, there's a new lesson on Thursday. And thank you for watching.